In Baku, a new challenge has surfaced in Formula One that's causing real discomfort for drivers, especially when it comes to the bouncing effect some cars are experiencing. Despite previous attempts to fix this problem a couple of races ago, the issue hasn't gone away, and it's most noticeable in the Mercedes cars. The team has been reaching out to the FIA for help, and it seems their concerns are finally being taken seriously. Curious about what the FIA's response is? Stick around until the end to find out. The drivers raised their concerns during the usual briefing on Friday, after several reports about neck and back pain linked to the rough surface of the Baku track. Earlier, only a few drivers, mainly those whose cars were most affected by the bouncing, had these complaints. George Russell from Mercedes and Carlos Sainz from Ferrari were among those struggling the most. But over the weekend, the problem seemed to affect more drivers, including Lewis Hamilton, who had a tough 90-minute race dealing with the issue. In response, the FIA issued a technical notice to the teams that includes both immediate and future solutions. However, this will not change how teams set up their cars for the upcoming race in Montreal. Instead, the FIA will focus on watching and collecting data during that event. The FIA explained that after the 8th round of this year's championship, the bouncing problem, technically called aerodynamic oscillations, was still very visible and continued to affect drivers' physical well-being. As the sport's governing body, the FIA decided it was necessary to step in for safety reasons and ask teams to make the required changes to reduce or eliminate the bouncing effect. They emphasized that this decision is based on safety concerns, highlighting the mental toll this issue places on drivers, not just the physical strain. Importantly, the changes don't need all teams to agree to be put in place. The FIA also mentioned that the decision was made after discussions with medical professionals, keeping driver safety as the top priority. In a sport where drivers often reach speeds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour, maintaining full focus is crucial. The FIA believes that any extra discomfort or exhaustion could distract drivers, potentially leading to serious accidents. On top of mental fatigue, many drivers have reported experiencing back pain following recent races, which only adds to the urgency of the situation. To address this, the FIA's technical directive outlines some clear steps for teams. First, there will be a closer inspection of the planks and skids under the cars, looking both at how they are designed and how much wear they're showing. Secondly, the FIA plans to develop a measurable limit based on the vertical forces that cars experience. This will help set an acceptable range for how much bouncing can happen during a race. While the exact formula for this measurement is still being finalized, teams have been invited to provide input on it. Besides these short-term measures, the FIA will hold a technical meeting with all the teams. The goal is to find medium-term solutions that reduce how likely cars are to bounce in the first place. This is important because, while the immediate steps may help control the problem, they don't solve the root cause. At first glance, this intervention seems like a win for Mercedes. Their W13 car has been the hardest to control when it comes to bouncing, so any rule limiting this effect could benefit them. Previously, we've discussed how if every team had to run within a specific setup to avoid bouncing, it might create a more level playing field. That said, Christian Horner, the team principal for Red Bull, voiced concerns after the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. He suggested that making new rules to address bouncing might unfairly disadvantage teams that haven't had this problem. But looking closely at what the FIA is planning, it appears their approach may be different from what some expected. In fact, the FIA might introduce limits that could actually challenge Mercedes rather than help them in the short term. A key detail in the FIA's statement is their plan to create a measurement based on the vertical acceleration forces the cars experience. This measurement will define how much bouncing is allowed moving forward. The limits could take various forms, from a strict maximum on the highest forces drivers feel, to more complex calculations like vibration exposure or spinal pressure. Although the exact details haven't been made public yet, the FIA's first step will be gathering data. Starting with the initial practice session at the Canadian Grand Prix, they will collect telemetry and carry out detailed technical checks on the cars to better understand the bouncing effect and its impact. This includes examining the planks and skids under the vehicles to see how they're holding up. Once enough data is collected, the FIA plans to enforce strict limits on G-forces or vibration levels on track. This is aimed at protecting drivers from suffering the kind of intense discomfort that Lewis Hamilton experienced in Baku. It's encouraging to see the FIA acting with driver safety as a priority, even if it means making some tough decisions. While it's unfortunate that drivers like George Russell and Lewis Hamilton had to go through such a difficult race in Azerbaijan, it's a relief that action is now being taken. The hope is that these measures will help the sport move forward. Lessons will be learned, and drivers will be better shielded from harm caused by bouncing in future races. Looking ahead, the FIA's efforts show a clear commitment to improving conditions for drivers. Nobody wants to see athletes of this caliber suffering unnecessary pain just to compete. The technical directive is just the beginning of what should be a series of changes aimed at protecting those behind the wheel. It's important to note that these challenges are not simply about physical discomfort, but also about how safely drivers can operate at such high speeds. Losing focus for even a moment due to pain or fatigue could have serious consequences, both for the individual and others on the track. With data gathering underway and further discussions planned, teams will need to adjust their cars accordingly. While some may benefit from these changes, others might face new hurdles. The balance between fair competition and safety remains a delicate one. Fans and experts alike will be watching closely to see how these new limits affect race strategies and car performance in Montreal and beyond. What remains clear is that driver well-being is taking center stage in these decisions, which could lead to safer and more consistent racing conditions in the seasons to come. The ongoing focus on safety highlights how Formula One continues to evolve, not just in terms of speed and technology, but also in how it cares for the athletes who push these machines to their limits. As the FIA works closely with teams and medical experts, the goal is to find solutions that keep drivers comfortable and alert, while maintaining the excitement and challenge of the sport. One interesting aspect is how this situation has sparked debates within the paddock. Some teams welcome the changes, seeing them as necessary adjustments to protect their drivers, while others worry about how new restrictions might affect their car's setup or competitiveness. This mix of opinions makes the FIA's task even more complex as they try to balance safety with fairness. Meanwhile, drivers continue to push through tough conditions, showing remarkable resilience. The recent problems with bouncing have made it clear just how demanding Formula One racing can be, even beyond the high speeds and sharp corners. It's a reminder that every race is a physical and mental test for these athletes. With the Canadians' Grand Prix approaching, all eyes will be on how teams respond to the FIA's guidance. Will these new measures bring relief for drivers or create new challenges on the track? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: driver health is now a top priority. As the season moves forward, the way teams manage bouncing will be crucial. Some might need to rethink their car setups entirely to stay within the new limits, while others could find advantages by adapting faster. This could shake up the competitive order, but that's part of the sport's constant evolution. From the fans' perspective, it's also important to understand these behind-the-scenes changes. What might seem like a small technical rule can have a big impact on what happens during the race, from how fast cars can go to how long drivers can maintain peak performance. For the drivers, though, the main thing is being able to race without worrying about pain distracting them or causing longer-term injuries. The FIA's move to set clear boundaries around bouncing is a step in that direction, aiming to protect their well-being in this demanding environment. While the full effects of these changes won't be visible immediately, the focus on safety sends a strong message that driver health matters just as much as speed and skill in Formula One. This will hopefully encourage teams to keep prioritizing the people behind the wheel, ensuring that the sport remains thrilling but also safe. In conclusion, the FIA's recent actions mark an important moment for Formula One. By addressing the bouncing problem and putting driver safety front and center, the sport is taking a responsible step forward. These measures show that while speed and performance are key, they should never come at the cost of the athlete's health. Lance Stroll's struggles continued at the Shanghai Grand Prix, where his recent poor form only seems to confirm what many have suspected, that his place in Formula One owes more to his father's involvement than to his own abilities behind the wheel. Despite Lance's recent remarks adding some uncertainty about his future in the sport, Aston Martin appears keen to maintain their relationship with him for the long term. But after his latest incident in China, it's clear his father might want to rethink the whole strategy if they truly aim to build a championship-winning team. The dynamic between Lance and Aston Martin is complicated, and his performance is raising serious questions. Could his mistakes become a significant setback for the team? And with Honda joining forces from 2026, is there any chance they could shift this situation for the better? The Chinese Grand Prix was a tough day for Stroll. After being outqualified by his teammate Fernando Alonso once again, he made headlines for the wrong reasons during the safety car period, when he collided with Daniel Ricciardo from behind. The incident baffled many experts, especially when Lance blamed Ricciardo for braking suddenly, a claim that seemed odd given they were mid-pack with several cars ahead. This crash not only ended what had been a promising race for Ricciardo but also fueled criticism of Lance's professionalism. The stewards handed Stroll a 10-second penalty, which he took at his last pit stop. Finishing last was the final blow to a disappointing race, and summed up his season so far. A performance far from what is expected from a team challenging Mercedes for fourth place in the Constructors' Championship. Before this race, Aston Martin was just a single point behind Mercedes, but strong finishes from Lewis Hamilton and George Russell pushed the Silver Arrows 12 points ahead. Alonso has been the main point scorer for Aston Martin, contributing 31 of their 40 points this season, while Stroll has only managed 9 points, currently sitting in 10th place in the standings. After the crash in China, the fans' frustration grew, especially following the team's public statements about Stroll's role in their future. The team values his technical input highly, but with only one driver regularly scoring points, many are questioning whether Aston Martin is stuck in the midfield until they find a stronger second driver. The crash in China sparked even more debate, especially after Lance denied responsibility. He described the collision as a concertina effect, claiming someone in front braked suddenly and caused a chain reaction. According to him, he was just caught up in the chaos, and it wasn't a simple case of him hitting Ricciardo from behind. This explanation didn't sit well with many fans and experts, especially since the facts show both drivers were stuck mid-pack with plenty of room ahead. It seemed clear Stroll wasn't paying enough attention to the cars in front of him and was more focused on the back of Ricciardo's car. Ricciardo himself was visibly upset after the incident. Watching Stroll's onboard footage, he pointed out that Lance wasn't even looking at him, but instead was focused elsewhere on the track, which is a huge mistake in such a critical moment. Ricciardo said that the impact was severe enough that almost half of Stroll's car ended up under his own, making it far from a minor error. This level of inattention during a race is considered amateurish and unprofessional by many in the paddock. Many people are baffled about why Lance is still racing in Formula One, with the obvious answer being his father's ownership of the team. Aston Martin has openly said they see Lance as a key part of their future, mainly because of his technical feedback, which they believe is valuable for car development. However, critics argue that much of this input could be provided just as well in the simulator or in lower racing categories, rather than risking race performance. Even Max Verstappen couldn't hold back his amusement when he saw how Stroll collided with Ricciardo during the safety car period, struggling to understand how such an incident could happen in professional racing. With Honda joining Aston Martin from 2026 and aiming to compete with the top teams, the question remains, can Aston Martin afford to keep Stroll as their second driver? They will need two consistent point scorers if they want to rise up the ranks, and so far, Alonso is the only one delivering.